I'd like to welcome everybody to the main speaker part of our primary purpose. Our main speaker is James V. Come on up, James V.
I'm James and I'm alcoholic. Well, I used to be able to run up those steps. Now it's like, I have a sobriety date of April 1st, 96. I have a sponsor and I sponsor people in this program, and I'm truly grateful for that. Thank you for asking me to come out tonight. I'm so great. I'm so happy you guys got a better view behind me. So just look out there and listen to me, Thanks, Matt. That was really, really great. Share, Matt been a joy to work with, and he showed me everything that I don't want to be now. But no, he's been a real help to me more than he know. My wife and I relocated here from St. Louis about 9-10 years ago, the Midwest. It's strange coming to a new place with 20 years of sobriety, because I sit in meetings, I hear people talk about stories that they did and hung out and grew up in this fellowship with, and I felt a little funny. And when I first got here, you guys was not doing this right. St. Louis had a whole different vibe, and I remember calling my sponsor back in St. Louis, and I said, man, they not doing this right. And he said, are they sober? I said, yeah. He said, do they got more time than you? Some of them do. Well, they doing it right, but I'm so grateful now when I go back home, they not doing it right, I've been sober longer than I've been drinking, so most of my talking will be in recovery. I talk a little bit about identifying me being an alcoholic, or when I realized I was an alcoholic. Growing up in St. Louis, my mom is a big part of my story. My mom was born with a brain tumor, and it made her head disfigured. And the kids in the neighborhood was a little cruel. They used to make jokes and talk about her. And it would be so painful emotionally, and the only way I can deal with that pain and discomfort was fighting. And I did not know at that time I was an unhealthy way of dealing with my emotions. But that was my only go-to was physically fighting. And it was so funny, I thought I was fighting to defend her honor. But in reality, I was fighting for my honor. That's how selfish I was. It didn't really matter how she felt about them talking about her. It all that mattered is how I felt. Not one time did I ask my mother, because most of it, she didn't hear it. I heard it. So, my first way of dealing with that emotional discomfort was violence. My grandfather was a minister. He raised me because my mom was unable to do that. And, my grandfather, I didn't realize his example was teaching me how to be a man, because I rebelled against it. I was angry at God. I would say, what kind of God would let a kid go through the torture and the teasing and all this stuff, and what kind of God would make his mother look like this? What kind of God would make a child suffer the way I suffer, I thought I suffered, with her disability, So I was very angry when I first got here at God. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But my first drink was when I was alcoholic age, 12 or 13. Back then, my grandfather gave me $20 for my birthday. It was on my birthday in June. And he gave me $20 for my birthday. Back then, $20 was a lot of money. I think you can buy a loaf of bread today for $20. But back then, $20, when I would go to the candy store, $1 would buy me a Suzy Q, a knee-high soda, a bag of Obiana potato chips, and I would get 30 cents back. And so, you can party real long with $20 back then. And he gave me $20 bill for my birthday, and the first thing I thought about is celebrate my birthday with my friends. The friends that used to talk about my mom, they was my buddies, I guess. And so we went to the liquor store and got Winehead Kenny. It was a guy we called him Winehead, because he drank and fell out and slept on the streets, So that's what I thought an alcoholic was. And so I gave him $20 and told him go in there and buy some liquor. And he said, all right, it cost y'all $1. Okay, back then we was happy to comp, we can get some liquor, And he bought a half pint of gin, Smirnoff gin, a 4-pack of Golden Champagne, and we bought a $5 bag of marijuana. And we went back in our little clubhouse to celebrate my birthday. Back then you can get 20 joints for $5, it was a good old day. But, anyway, I'm dating myself, so follow me, And it was my birthday, and I was the one that opened up the gin. I hit the bottle of the bottle. I don't know where I got that from, but I hit the bottom, cracked the top, took a swig out that gin. It burned going down. Then I chased it with that Golden Champagne, and it put the fire out. Then I took a drag off that joint. Man, that was a perfect combination. I mean, if I would have stopped there, I wouldn't be here now. If I could have kept that combination going for the rest of my life, that was it. That was the perfect mix. One hit, and one swallow. That was perfect. It felt great. And, I can remember we laughing, acting silly, and somebody made a joke about my mom. And for the first time in my life, it didn't hurt. I didn't want to defend it. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anything about what they were saying. That's the first thing alcohol and drugs did for me. It took away the pain that I could not control or had any control over, the emotional stuff. And from that day forward, I was like an after-school story. It didn't stay at that one hit. It really progressed. At the end of my addiction, I was married to a young lady with 3 kids, and my addiction was just off the chain. I was a cook at that time, and for months, I never made it home with a paycheck. I remember telling her, I got paid on a Sunday. So by Sunday, everybody else is spending all their paycheck. So when I went out in the neighborhood, I was the king of New York, you know what I mean? And I had a pocket full of money, and, I get paid Sunday evening. I go down there and be the big shot. Yeah, go to the boot. Because back then in St. Louis, you couldn't buy liquor on Sunday. But, we had a local bootlegger, that sold alcohol. Anyway, at the end of my drinking, I was 150 pounds, soaking wet. When I get paid, it took me 2 or 3 days to get back home. I come home, be broke, it just took over my life. This particular time, I did some scandalous stuff, and I got my hand on a few $1,000s, like $5,000, And the good alcoholic I was, I said, you know what? I haven't did the right thing for a long time. I'm gonna go home and give my wife half of this $5,000. Half of $5,000 was 2. And I really thought I was doing something. You know what I mean? I gave her $2,000. I had $3,000. By this time, my disease did not have to play a game with me. I knew I was gonna go drink up every penny I had for me. Because it used to tell me this time you can only do a little bit, and you go home and pay the bills and buy groceries and all that. And I never was able to do that. But this time, I knew that was off the table. I'm gonna go drink and do everything I have in my pocket. See, I was the kind of alcoholic, I go down in the neighborhood, I separate my money. I put what I'm gonna use, drink over here, I put what I'm gonna carry home over here, and then I'm gonna carry how I'm gonna get to work in the back pocket. By the end of the day, all the pockets was empty, I never made it home like that. But this particular time, I said, you know what, I'm gonna give her a couple of $1,000 and I'm gonna go out and drink. I was gone for 3 or 4 days. And I remember it was in the wintertime. It was in January. In St. Louis, it gets very, very, very cold in the wintertime. Like the high is 0, and I'm not exaggerating. It's very, very, very cold. And I remember coming home, I'm broke. My mind said, well, you can go home and get a couple $100 of that money. She still have $1,700 left. And I'm gonna tell you how insane it was. I had to drive around the block 2 or 3 times to convince myself that was a good idea. And I'm driving around, yeah, it'll be good. And so I got enough courage to get home and asked her for a couple $100 of that money. And she began to tell me in so many words, no. And, my alcoholism was so out of control, I held her and the kids hostage. And then I locked the door and I said, now I want all my money. And the kids was crying, she was crying, and I didn't feel it. Alcohol works so much, it numbs me from that hurt and pain, but it also numbs me from compassion and love. I could not feel when someone teased me or hurt me or said bad words, but I also could not feel compassion. It erased all of that emotion. So alcohol do work till it don't. Anyway, long story short, she said, okay, let me and the kids go, I'll give you all your money. She got the kids dressed and they standing by the door, they crying, she crying, and she had a purse clenched up on her arms. And she threw me the purse and her and the kids ran out the house. And I grabbed the purse and I shook it and it was pencils and makeup in there, not a penny. But what they did, it gave me, we have that moment of clarity sometimes. I always say when opportunity meets willingness, that's when the blessing happens. Sometimes the willingness is here and the opportunity is not. Sometimes the opportunity here and the willingness is not. At that moment, they lined up. And I sat on the side of the bed and I said, Jane, how far you would have went to get the next drink? And I could not answer that. I know for me, at that time, I worked step 1. I knew I was powerless. Well, I worked the first half of step 1. I knew I was powerless over what I was doing. And, I didn't know my life was unmanageable because I didn't know what unmanageability was. When you live unmanageable, unmanageable is normal. So I couldn't say my life was unmanageable because I was living normal. I didn't understand the definition of unmanageability till I came into these rooms. And shortly after that, I asked that ex-wife to drop me off at the treatment center for the last time. And when she dropped me off at the door, she said, I don't want you to come back home. And I said, I understand, but I got to go in here. To me, that's when I worked step 2. I had a suspicion that something on the other side of that door had more power than I had on this side of the door. I did not know. I didn't know what it was. But when I went in the treatment center, I went in there with a suspicion that something in that building can help me stop doing what I was doing when I didn't want to do it. I didn't know it was. I had a suspicion. That's all it took for me in step 2. To have a suspicion that a power greater than me can restore me to sanity. I didn't know. I didn't know I was insane. I didn't know the definition of sanity. But I know I was doing things outside my control, and I couldn't stop. When I got in the treatment center, I met my sponsor, and he's been my sponsor for 32 years. And, I have 29 years today. I got one day separating me from 32 years and 29 years. And if I have time, I'll go into that relapse. But I met my sponsor. And, and I'm going to say this, my sponsor is really going through some health issues. And it's so important how we treat our sponsees, because now I'm calling him and checking on him and trying to be available emotional support to him. You never know when you have to rely on somebody that you've come along this way. So guys, treat your sponsees good. They might have to bring you a glass of water, and that's for real. But anyway, I met my sponsor in that treatment center. He was working there as a tech. And what impressed me was my sponsor graduated from Harvard, top of his class. He done went to New York. He worked for a major television station in St. Louis, and he was working at this treatment center for $6 an hour. And I'm like, golly, that's really humbling, But what he did is he made the book come alive. Every night at 6 o'clock, he would have a big book study. And I would sit there and I would listen to him in this big book study. And when he went through the book, it was like, when he first explained the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body, it's like, wow, that's why when I start, I can't stop. That's why I can't stop starting, and it started to really make sense to me. You can't stop on your own. So, speeding up, he carried me through the steps. And I remember getting to the third step with him. And I had this list on why I can't turn my will and my life over to a God that did me like this. I'm waiting on him. I'm waiting on the third step. We got to the third step. He said, all right, James, read the third step. And I read, made the decision, turn. He said, stop. I said, I ain't done, because I'm waiting to get to this God as we understood. I'm ready to fight, you know what I mean? And I'm ready to plead my case, to tell him why I can't turn my will and my life over to this God. And he stopped me at make a decision. And I'm like, ooh, it's something when people catch your game off when you're ready to argue and they don't let you get to the argument part, you know what I mean? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm not done. He said, tell me what decision means. I'm like, Because my mind is already past that decision stuff. I'm already ready for the God stuff. And he said something that really broke that down. He said, James, in step 3, you don't turn your will and life over. You make a decision to do it. And he said something that followed that. He said, you can make a decision and not follow it up with action. That decision you make don't mean it come true. I'm like, boy, it's something. That's like, I don't like you, man. You know what I mean? Because he took all the air out of my cell. You know what I mean? I'm ready to fight. And when he said that, I'm like, Then he explained to me what the word decision really means. And I use it so, for me, in my story, I'm a cook. I like cooking. I have a food truck, and that's my hobby is cooking. And I use an analogy of making a decision to cook a peach cobbler. On Sunday, football game on, and I can say, hey, G, I'm going to make a peach cobbler for dinner. She said, okay. And I'm sitting on the couch watching the Raiders lose, and I'm sitting on the couch watching the football game, and I made a decision at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to make a peach cobbler. It's 10 o'clock. I'm still watching the football game. 11, 12 o'clock, another game come on. I'm sitting there. 1 o'clock, another game come on. After I made that decision, I didn't follow it up with action. Until I get up off the couch, go in the kitchen, turn the oven on, get the ingredients down, mix it up in a bowl, do what I roll out the dough, put it in the pan, pour everything in there, stick it in the oven, then that decision I made sitting on that couch come real after I followed that decision with action. And he said, James, 4 through 12 is the action steps to make you be able to turn your will and life over to the care of God. I'm like, okay. And you know, I'm the kind of alcoholic, I'm going to do this to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you what you saying ain't right. And so I did. I went to the 4th step. And you know, 4th step, oh man, I heard people in the meeting, oh man, 4th step's so scary. You know, you got to tell everybody your past and blah, blah, blah. And I hesitated for months. And my sponsor like, man, why you didn't get this 4th step done? What are you doing? I said, man, I don't want to tell nobody my stuff. He started laughing. He said, where do it say in the 4th step you tell anybody anything? He said, you don't have to tell nobody in the 4th step. He said take a searching and fearlessly moral inventory of who? Me. He said, you know what you did and what you didn't do? And he asked me to write 3 things that I said I'll never tell another individual. I said, okay. And I wrote those 3 things and I slid it to him. He said, no, I'll read them. But before I read them, he told me 3 things he said he'd never say. Right then, that fear melted away when he told me his 3. And I did the 4th step. And when we got to the 5th step, when he says, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrong, he focused on, he said, James, I don't care what you did, we need to know why you did it. The nature of what you did is the only thing gonna change. He said, it don't matter what you did. It said the exact nature of your wrongs. And, you know, my mind said, well, you know, well, I got to admit to God, he know everything, he saw it. I was there, and it ain't none of your business. And what he explained to me, he said, James, each one of those processes have a blessing connected to it. He said, when you admit it to God, you asking for help. When you admit it to me, you humbling yourself. And when you admit it to yourself, you're being honest. He said, I know you haven't been honest in a long time. And those 3 things there help you get ready to see your character defects in 6 and 7. You know, well, my character defects, you know. When I humbled myself, I was willing to look at the part I played in every situation of my life. You know, step 6, real quick, it says, you know, entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. That means James don't pick and choose which one get moved. It don't say get entirely ready for James to change. It says get entirely ready for God to remove. And the key element of step 6 is willingness. I have to be willing to let go of something that I thought protected me. See, some of my defects of character I thought was my protective mechanism. I thought they was protecting me. If you do something to me and I be mean to you, you won't do it again. If I do something to you and I do double back to you, you're gonna remember, don't do that to him no more. But a lot of times people do stuff to you and you retaliate, they don't know why you did it back to them. They don't remember. You know, they don't know, oh yeah, he get me back for what I did to him. That's not how it works. You know, but that's what I thought. I'm gonna get you and I'm gonna get you good. And I'm gonna let you know what you did hurt me. Because I was the kind of alcoholic, I expressed my feelings with my actions. I didn't have words to tell you how I felt. I showed you how I felt. And you're supposed to know why I showed you. I don't have to tell you, you're supposed to know. So, you know, step 6 really showed me my reaction to my emotions. Step 6 showed my reactions to my emotions. Step 7, I used to think those 2 was together, but when it says humbly ask him to remove my shortcomings, that's my reaction to my feelings. God don't take away how I feel. And you don't believe me? Look at step 10. It said when these things crop up. It didn't say if. It said when they crop up, we do those 4 things. So it tells me in step 7, that my only thing can change is my reactions to my feelings, not my emotions and my feelings. I still get angry. I still feel sensitive when somebody hurt my feelings. I still feel like I want to control some situations. I still become judgmental. On my way over here, I didn't judge y'all. I know y'all look nice. When I get here, y'all been so nice. The young lady was at the door. She spoke. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. I'm like, shoot. That shows you how sick I am. I'm wrong again. Because you guys have been really nice and friendly, and I really appreciate that. But anyway, step 8. To me, is so important to realize that I'm not going to stop feeling who I am. I'm human. I'm going to still feel some things, and I'm going to still feel emotions, and I'm going to still feel these things that used to control my behavior. Only thing different is I don't act on them. No, that's not true. I don't act as much on them. Let me clear that up. I still act on some of them, but it's a step to clean up that. It's called making amends. When I do act up, I still have some. See, this program set me up. It didn't tell me you won't act up. It tells me when you act up what to do. You be accountable, you make amends, and you try to change your behavior. Step 10 is my favorite. My wife used to get so mad at me because I'd be like, step 10. She's like, stop talking about step 10. But step 10 keeps me in check. It says when these things crop up, it tells me to do 4 things. It said, ask God immediately, not later, to remove it. Then it says, it said tell somebody immediately. Third thing it says, go make amends immediately. Then the 4th thing it said, turn your attention to help others. And I guarantee you follow that format, it would change the way you react to life. Wrap it up and 11 and 12 is the least talked about steps in this program to me. Most people don't want to talk about prayer and meditation. But how can you not talk about it, and it's in our 12 steps? It says sought through prayer and meditation to improve. It didn't say to create. It said to improve our conscious contact. That means I need that. So when I'm consciously dealing with y'all, my behavior. It didn't say while I'm asleep. It said conscious. When I'm consciously going around and driving in traffic, I need to be aware of my behavior. So, I have to do that through prayer and meditation because James can't control James. I'm convinced James cannot control James. In step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and I love when it said we try to carry this message. We try. One thing about my sponsor taught me, being perfect is a character defect. If I have a perfect life, I can't even fit in it, let alone somebody else. So it says try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice. It didn't say be perfect. Practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm so grateful that I don't have to work this step 100%. I'm so grateful I got to clean up when I fall short. I'm so grateful that my expectations of others have shrank. Therefore, my peace has rise. I heard this one speaker say this, and I'm going to shut up. He said, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was blind, I couldn't walk, and I couldn't talk. And he said AA gave him the opportunity to see his wrongs and see the beauty in others. It gave him the opportunity to walk through situations that I normally would lay down and crumble in. And it gave me the opportunity to know how to talk and treat people. And I'm so grateful for this program that gave me all those gifts. Thank you.